very quiet.
Let's roll, please. Rolling.
Ready and action.
Walt Disney had a saying, which is that he doesn't make movies for children. He makes movies for the child in all of us. Largely, I think as a filmmaker, that's all you can do, is you can make a film for your own sensibilities. Otherwise, you're second guessing. You're trying to create something that's somebody else's movie, and it's impossible. You're always chasing your tail. I think a lot of movies don't really hit their target because there wasn't a single vision. There wasn't a single idea for the movie.
And cut it.
This was such a big movie. It was very big news when we got the rights, and it was a very hot commodity in Hollywood at that time. So our phones were ringing off the hook for a couple months there. A number of incredibly talented and wonderful directors expressed interest. We certainly met with a number of them. And then one day I got a call from an agent who said, you know who you should consider for this? You should consider my new client, Andrew Adamson. He directed Shrek.
We met Andrew for the first time at a cafe in Burbank. And he had literally, it was the night before, was the Academy Awards. And after one meeting with Andrew, Perry and I were both in agreement that this was the right person.
After doing Shrek, I didn't want to do anything like this. I really wanted to do a small character-based movie. It was just a book that was so dear to me. It was a story that was so dear to me. I couldn't handle the idea of not doing it, letting someone else do it, and then maybe it wouldn't turn out how I liked and I could only hold myself responsible. So when the studio came to me with this property, it was impossible for me to turn down. I think it is better sitting this way.
And I had a couple of people say along the way, well, you know, he did really well with the Shrek movies, but how's he going to do with live action?
His background is visual effects, but he does have a wonderful sense of style and a wonderful sense of space, textures.
As he looks up this way and then all of a sudden she's there.
Yeah.
You can see it in the way he puts his films together. So he's where he should be. He should be a director. Because he does span all the different qualities you need to put something together, technically, visually, and which I think he's the best of at story-wise.
You waited all night the night before, then there's a big earthquake just as you're about to go, and you turn around and the table's broken and something's happened. And action.
I love the fact that he, for his first live action, should make a film of this size. But it was great because it meant that we were making a film of this size with someone who had a beginner's mind, who was making his first feature, in a way, even though he must be the most experienced first feature film director ever.
The first thing I did after meeting with Walden, and actually before meeting with the estate, was I sat down and I wrote out all my memories from reading the book, before actually even rereading it. I just really wanted, I decided straight away that I really wanted to capture what it was that I loved as a child. So I kind of wrote down everything I could remember.
A couple days later, I get this call from him. He said, I actually took the time over the weekend to type out some thoughts that I have on the movie. I'd love to send them your way. Sure, great, go ahead, send them. I get a 20-page comprehensive it was a set of director's notes, and it told you everything he wanted to do, from character work, from the color palettes of the movie, from the CGI effects he wanted to do, how he wanted to render the battle, the music. He knew, he had a vision that was just perfect.
And so basically I decided, okay, if they're up for it, I don't so much want to make the book, which is the first of the Chronicles, but I want to make my memory of the book, which is far more expansive. Because C.S. Lewis wrote in a way that was very minimalist. Unlike Tolkien, who spelt everything out and was very specific, C.S. Lewis painted a picture and left a lot to your imagination.
There's very little description of many characters, of the battle, which doesn't even exist in the book. The aftermath does.
In the book, it's a page and a half in retrospect. It's Peter basically telling Aslan what happened, but I remembered it as a child as this incredible battle with minotaurs against centaurs, against fauns and satyrs. It's really an incredible battle, and it's very different from anything we've seen before.
It's a child's imagination that brings those books to life.
So that was where Andrew was coming from.
There's a line in the beginning of the book that just says it was during the bombing raids on London, and it's pretty much, that's how much detail you get about the fact that they're in the war.
Andrew, good to see you, brother. Good to see you too.
And talking with Doug Gresham, who's C.S. Lewis' stepson, he was interested in, and I was interested in expanding that idea. And we kind of cooked up this idea of really starting to see the action of World War II to really establish the setting. And I wanted to really set up the fact that these were real children in a real world in real jeopardy.
I instantly could picture that movie that took the very simple book opening, it was wartime and children were sent away to the countryside, and built that up into this, bombing of London sequence.
So that the audience walks in expecting to see a drama involving 4 children shipped off to the country, and instead they're suddenly immersed in this action sequence. And you get to meet the children in this situation.
It's the same journey it was in the book, but it just seems so much more epic when kind of put in movie terms.
I wanted to make a story about a family fragmented and disenfranchised in World War II that's ultimately empowered, and through their unity, empowered to solve this problem and defeat this witch and solve the war in Narnia.
And so what he's doing is marrying the book, the wonderful C.S. Lewis book, with the imagination that he brought to reading it when he was a 9-year-old boy. And he described to me the movie that he wanted to make, and I said, I want to see that movie.
To me, Narnia was always a real place. Actually, when I was initially interviewing production designers, a lot of people were drawing those parallels to stories like Wizard of Oz, where these were places where the children had created these worlds in their heads as a place they could escape to. I never saw it that way when I read it as a child. I always saw that they stepped through the wardrobe.
Impossible.
And they ended up in Narnia, and Narnia was a real coexistent world.
I came to this film from Peter Pan, where we had the opportunity to play a little more fantasy, if you like. No, Andrew didn't want that. He wanted Narnia to be a real world.
I think in order to make the fantasy have the drama that you want, have the jeopardy that you want, you have to believe in the real place.
What we try and do with all these situations is have the rationale for the way they look. And Mr. Tumnus, Andrew suggested he might be a notary or have things to do with writing or documents and things in his life. So this helps us to start thinking of what sort of house is it that he lives in. Well, we always referred back to the illustrations in the book. Pauline Baynes originally illustrated it, so there were clues there about Mr. Tumnus's house, but we didn't always follow them to the letter.
Mr. Tumnus's house, it gave me so much, a lot of what was in there and how it was constructed. It really lay quite happily with the way that I'd seen him and seen where he lived, Such comfort, such coziness.
The wardrobe, well, that was a major project. I mean, it's probably the most important prop in the film. You always have to start somewhere. So we found the wardrobe that C.S. Lewis owned. It's a big oblong square wardrobe with a carving on it. The backstory to the wardrobe is that the professor, as a child, Diggory Kirk, appears in the story called The Magician's Nephew. And he goes into Narnia.
From Narnia, brought back an apple that he gave to his mother that cured her from an illness she had, and he then planted the apple core in the garden. It grew into a tree. When the tree died, he had it made into a wardrobe.
Andrew came up with the idea of why don't we tell the story of the magician's nephew in the carvings. So I went through the book and listed all these significant images that are carved into the panels of the wardrobe, plus the lion's heads at the top, sort of pediments of the columns, and at the bottom we've got the White Witch and her sister. So the whole of the wardrobe tells a really quite nice story.
The lamppost, obviously a fawn with an umbrella by a lamppost in the snow, is the image that C.S. Lewis held with him since he was 16, that that started this whole story. And that to me is just a really evocative image. And all the children passed Lantern Waste. They passed the lamppost. It's kind of like the eternal light that leads them into Narnia. So I wanted to try and make that feel as close to, again, my memory and my imagination of what it was when I read it as a child. Its origin was from when the White Witch first came to Narnia. At its conception, she had a piece of a lamppost. She had torn off a lamppost in our world while fighting the police, and she threw it at Aslan. It stuck into the ground, and like everything else in the world, started to grow.
When you watch the film, it's very subtle. You have to look for it, but the lamppost is actually rooted into the snow of the forest.
It's one of those things where any number of fans of the book that came to visit us all said, this is exactly how I imagined the lamppost in Narnia to be.
The design of the film is a star of the film, if not the star of the film. It's so beautiful, that snow land and those primary colours.
I wanted to make sure that our world, our Narnia, the Narnia that we put on screen, had all of the texture and reality that any other real world would be. It's an alternative reality. It's a somewhat idealized reality, but it exists. It's physical, it's real, there's real rules to the world. You know, the deep magic is something that's inherent to the land.
From the moment we started casting for the children, I knew how good he was going to be.
Give her a look up and down. Look how sweet she looks. Look how happy she looks.
I think Andrew's skill with the actors was really in providing the guidance and enthusiasm, particularly for these younger kids. I mean, to have a young person of 9 years age to sustain their interest over 12 months, day in and day out, is a great challenge for a director.
Okay, this is crazy. I don't know where the scene's going. Let's go back on script.
One of the things I did is I only cast children that I actually liked.
You can't just leave.
People that I wanted to hang out with really the hope that they would also like hanging out with each other.
Everyone give Skander a big hug.
No! Well, Andrew did an extraordinary thing by finding these 4 children who are as fresh as daisies, and they were delightful, and they managed to translate that freshness onto the screen.
I looked at, on tape, about 2,500 kids, probably met with about 700 of those, workshopped about 400 of them, narrowed it down to about 120 that I worked with on a more individual basis to get down to our final 4. I didn't particularly want to find actors as much as I wanted to find children that were capable of acting, but that were inherently like our characters.
We are all like our parts.
Anna, have you read all the books?
Of course I have.
Yeah,
Not.
Yeah, I have too.
Anna is the smart one, so...
I'm really, really happy to be working with such professionals.
Anna was somebody who I was just blown away by. I remember she arrived early for an audition scene and just came in and sat down and talked to me, and I could have been talking to a 25-year-old. Just so together and smart and mature, and so many of those things that I wanted Susan to be.
Anna is angel. Skander is demon.
Skander's very much like Edmund, I have to admit that.
He had these wonderful dark eyes. He looked like he could be George's older brother, and he definitely had that mischief in himself.
He's really like me. He's like always getting into trouble and stuff.
I've been working hard, but William on the
I've
other
been
hand.
doing loads of work.
Will is brother.
He so fitted Peter. You know, he was also at that point in life where he was halfway between childhood and manhood.
Let's go!
And was going through, personally, very much what Peter went through on his journey to manhood in this movie, and the responsibilities of being an older brother and a father figure.
Peter, wake up! Peter, wake up! It's really bad!
Georgie really is like Lucy. She's like all innocent, which she really is, and a little annoying at times.
He stole my biscuit. That's what I like most about her, is she's like me a lot.
Get the hot tub!
Georgie Henley was just, I knew from the moment I saw her on tape that she was Lucy, and I'd looked at a lot of children by that stage. There was a moment where she was just so believable in her very first audition.
Come on, Peter, gastrovascular.
She really takes on the role, she feels the character, and she just goes with it.
Andrew, any notes? Cool.
So to direct, she's incredible. She's this imaginative, funny, the wittiest 9-year-old I've ever met.
I'm really not crazy.
And it was just all of those things that I wanted Lucy to be.
She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, but she really isn't.
The Queen in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe could be played very characterized, very cartoonish if you want. That's not who she is to me. She has to be as powerful and evil as Aslan is powerful and good.
I have no interest in prisoners.
Andrew and I agreed our first choice for the White Witch was Tilda Swinton.
One of the challenges with the White Witch that Tilda and I faced was avoiding the cliche. The character of the evil female has become somewhat of a cliche. I think it was somewhat original when C.S. Lewis wrote this character, but since then we've had, you know, the evil stepmother, the Cruella de Vil's, the sort of screeching, cackling women. And Tilda and I wanted to be sure that the White Witch didn't end up being there. In fact, that's one of the reasons I cast Tilda, is I just knew she would never go there. She was a much more sophisticated, complex actor.
Do you know why you're here, Fawn? Because I believe in a free Narnia.
Mr. Tumnus was a very difficult character to find. He was a character that basically had to kidnap a little girl and yet still be likable. So whoever I cast for the character had to be very warm and likable on first meeting.
You find the real person who's got to do a bad thing, and why does he have to do it, and why can't he stop himself doing it?
I had often said that he was somebody who had a double agenda. I kind of saw him almost like a German living in Nazi Germany discovering a Jewish child and knowing that the propaganda and the government was telling him to do one thing, but his internal ethics and morals were telling him another thing.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
When James came to audition, he got that double agenda. It came through in his performance, in his reading. He had that warm presence that you knew that could just come through on the screen.
No matter what happens, Lucy Pevensey, I am glad to have met you.
Well, you know, the interesting thing is we shot this movie, and then we had a significant number of actors still to go out and find. And these are the actors who did the voices of some of the creatures.
Impossible.
The character of Aslan was probably the hardest to cast. He's an omnipotent character. He has to be, you know, powerful, untouchable, and at the same time be sympathetic and vulnerable.
From here, I must go on alone.
You don't want him to be so strong and so omnipotent that at the point where he gives of himself and gives his life, you don't feel sympathy for him. Liam is somebody who just has an incredible resonance and depth to his voice. I mean, he has a voice that you can see coming out, you can hear coming out of a lion.
Welcome, Peter, son of Adam. Welcome, Susan and Lucy.
He had the warmth in his voice that would draw you to him. When he turns fierce and shouts at the White Witch, it is a roar.
Do not cite the deep magic to me, witch. I was there when it was written.
There's a danger that he's able to project. And so I think he was perfect for this character.
It is finished.
Andrew's really amazing at picking the right voices for these roles. I mean, because you hear the people initially in whatever job they'd done previously, like, is that really Mr. Beaver, Ray Winstone? Is that really going to be Mrs. Beaver, Dawn French? But then when they do it, I mean, Andrew hears it. There's something in his brain or in his ears, something that he hears, something that maybe the rest of us don't hear initially. And it's not until he actually pulls it out of the actors that then it's like, oh, of course, why would you ever think it's anyone but that?
So then we come back and we say, all right, now we've got to create these characters in so many ways.
Richard, I didn't even see you there.
When Andrew came and approached us and asked us if we'd like to do Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, naturally we were really thrilled, and we felt that we could establish the world of Narnia for him and help in the development of the characters and the creatures and the armor and weapons and the various cultures of insignia on these things.
Do you have any particular feelings, Roger?
Andrew was incredible at the level of interaction he took with us. He was intimately involved and interested in every detail that we were getting involved in, which was a terrific thing for us.
I like the way she hangs upside down, has these very human hands to hang on with. That's really creepy.
I mean, I think number 10 takes that one step further, actually.
Yeah, it might be too creepy.
We're dealing with nearly every mythological creature ever invented.
We may actually want to tilt...
And to actually realize those and interpret them and come out with creatures that don't just look like animals but are really believable sentient beings.
In the case of C.S. Lewis's writing, of course, he's so celebrated in the Greek myth and mythology that a lot of his creatures were based strongly in the history of this mythology. But where the challenge came was actually trying to refine these characters, these mythological creatures, into something that works well on screen. It's one thing to see a illustrated or even a bronze of a half-man, half-horse twisting in some contorted position, galloping into battle, whatever. It's another thing to physically get it to work as a human-animal integration at a believable level. It's very important to us as we're designing this that they all feel like they belong in the same world. And that required a lot of very subtle, very complex design work. It's a capiche sword from the Egyptian culture and goes along with this, which is the Minotaur, the hero Minotaur's swords.
Wow.
Interacting with Andrew on a 2 or 3 time weekly basis.
I don't think the leg proportion is quite right in number 9.
To try and capture the various aspects of these creatures. This is the Minotaur armor.
And Richard and his team were just capable of this great understanding.
You can see there the Medusa's head.
Of the mythology, the history.
When Aslan bares his teeth, winter meets its death.
All of the things behind Narnia that would then come through in the designs of the creatures.
It's going to be a sizable army on the days. It's going to be fantastic, in fact.
When it came down to realizing and actually producing the full-size prosthetics and costumes and animatronics, Richard very reluctantly passed me on to a dear friend of his, Howard Berger.
Howie. Oh no. Just for you.
And I say reluctantly because Richard, I know, wanted to be able to complete the designs all the way through, and he was in fact able to stay involved with Howard.
It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
We had a hell of a week last week, but it was awesome.
But it was Howard and his team at K&B who ultimately realized these creatures.
Doing a fashion parade.
We're doing a fashion parade. Oh, fun. A parade of monsters.
Right.
Minotaur jog. And to add more fun, this is a goblin. I had a lot of great ideas, I thought. I went to the table with him, with Andrew, and he liked the work that K&B was doing, but I think he really liked the enthusiasm I brought.
Look how excited Howard is. He's a boy.
I would then go back after the meeting and be crazy and just so excited and think, and then call Andrew's assistant and go, can I get another meeting with Andrew? We're going to show it to Andrew and see what he has to say.
Well, it's hard to get it far enough away from
there, of course. But no, it's kind of like you're in Caravel right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Howard did pretty much stalk me, it's true, but it worked.
We got a crew of 30 that'll be traveling with us.
Howard, I don't think, had ever done anything of this scale before. Not many people have.
We'll hit him with the silicone sheen, you know, that'll give it like that oily, sweaty feeling.
It really was Howard's enthusiasm and love for the material that got him the job.
1, 2, 3, roar.
Very cool.
I mean, they're fantasy characters. You're not going to ever see anything walking around like that, but they're still reality-based to some degree, and they're reality-based to the world of Narnia. And that was it. It's like we wanted to make everything that was in Narnia feel that it lived within this universe.
And all credit to Andrew for choosing to utilize physical creatures on set, filming them, trying to capture the maximum he could actually in the real world alongside the children, alongside the other actors, to build and fabricate the rich diversity of creatures in the world of Narnia. But then, of course, there is handover to the digital effects department.
Because in many cases, whatever was created on set, we had to either extend or replicate. As you can see, the set, we can't actually build a great hall. We've got kind of a good hall, and we'll continue it and make it much bigger. The set goes at least 2 or 3 times as wide on either side. In many respects, all of that had to be in the same world as Andrew's vision, which again was this very realistic world. And so the level of technical challenges we would face would be to create fur that moved as realistically as any animal you would take out and photograph. And this was a heck of a lot of creatures we had to do this for. I mean, there's 30+ different types of creatures that all had to be either built in prosthetics and photographed on set, which we would then have to match and duplicate, or we would have to create them entirely in the computer.
And action.
When it's over and done with, we will have shot about 1,600 visual effects shots in this movie, which is not a record, but pretty close to it, and there are very few films that have had that many.
And cut. Good. Check the game.
And it takes Andrew Adamson to do that, but then he can, because he's the kind of boss on the virtual world.
Andrew, clean slate?
Yep.
And you want to look at green screen because they're done?
Sure.
He so wrote the book on special effects, and that's to the benefit of the film.
What we have to imagine is there's thousands of creatures here. It's not just the U-80 here. There's thousands of creatures.
Yeah,
so when
4,920 actually.
Oh. He comes from having been a visual effects supervisor. So in a strange way, no matter how many professionals and authorities we have on visual effects, we have a director who knows as much, if not more than they.
It's been a pretty remarkable experience working with Andrew on the film.
He really just uses the momentum and the mass.
He can give us direction that's specific to, adjust this animation control over here, or, the lighting. If you adjust these few technical things, it'll give me the look that I'm after.
I knew that whoever I brought in would have to tolerate my meddling and at the same time be secure enough and experienced enough to be able to take things and run with them and push back on me.
When Andrew called me, it was at the moment where storyboarding was just beginning. And by the time also I came on board, Previs, computer-generated pre-visualization in the computer, had begun for a number of months. And Andrew has focused on the battle at that moment to tell not only himself but other people who were supporting the film exactly what kind of story he wanted to tell.
I think she would actually have to move him out of the way or something. It doesn't seem a good reason for him to back out.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to map out a lot of these very complex action sequences where we would define how we would achieve the shots on a shot-by-shot basis. We actually had the battle scene prevised probably 2 years before we started shooting it, and that was a very important part of the design process of finding the tone of the movie.
There were some instances that Andrew and I talked about in which I knew, even from just the script stage, that there was going to be nothing besides empty grass fields and some mountains, and that everything else in the image was going to have to be filled with computer-generated characters. From that standpoint itself, I knew the scope of visual effects was going to be extraordinary.
We started off with working with a company called Rhythm and Hughes. And Rhythm and Hughes is well known for their animation skills, and Andrew felt comfortable that they could handle some of the key roles.
One of the biggest things we had to figure out was how we're going to make a CG lion that really lives up to what everyone's expecting of Aslan.
And the paw comes out, and then his head comes out, and we cut and we check the gate.
I think the greatest excitement that I had was we were on location, and they brought to us on a small laptop computer a test that they had been working on, which showed a girl, actually 2 girls, walking down the street, literally just down any neighborhood street on the sidewalk, and in between them was a lion. And they showed it to us, and I was just absolutely struck by the fact that this was a completely real lion. The girls were touching him, he was walking, he shook his mane. It was just extraordinary. It was great. A great pick-me-up, it was a great morale booster, and we all of a sudden realized that this is going to happen.
There is a deep magic more powerful than any of us that rules over all of Narnia.
Aslan was such an important character to the film, such a critical role, that he had to not only look real, his movement had to be real, and then the acting performance we were going to get from this CG character had to be something you'd never seen before, and was equal to any actor we had on screen.
You have a traitor in your midst, Aslan.
His offense was not against you.
We had to build in the facial controls to be able to get every expression, every emotional beat that Andrew was going to demand. We also went to Sony Imageworks for some character work. That included Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, who have to be our most anthropomorphic characters in the film, in that you have to relate to them almost as if they're people, but still keeping in mind that they are animals and they have to still move and act like animals.
Andrew's experience with computer animation led him to work with these animators in just a very specific fashion. What's interesting about it is he will focus on a hand gesture, he'll focus on an eye movement, a turn of a head, and these are all things that I stand back and I marvel at, because when they're actually implemented and it's finally finished,
Put that down, boy.
you see the reason why he twitched the hand, why he turned his eyes, why he tipped the head just a little bit.
And cut it. I'll say it once more.
Andrew's certainly all over every aspect of it, and we have to rise to that occasion on every character, every background, everything we do. So there is an incredible eye to detail in this film.
As a filmmaker, I think I always want to bring something new. Anytime you make a movie, you want to give the audience something they haven't seen before. This book kind of dictated a certain scale and size that I believe it needed to be. And at a certain point, the movie just takes on a life of its own. It just starts telling you what it needs to be. And as you just process it and think about it, it usually expands rather than contracts. And it's a big story. You know, this was an incredibly arduous film. We shot for 7 or 8 months, sometimes in distant locations. Sometimes people were practically living in wool sheds. And I always felt an enthusiasm and an energy and a love for the property from the crew, and an incredible support from the crew. I mean, they seemed to believe in the film as much as I did.
New Zealand was probably the very first place we thought about shooting.
It's such a phenomenally beautiful place, and it has a kind of mythical quality that is actually very cinematic. And it took about 12 years to shoot it.
There was not an easy day on this film. New Zealand, it is not equipped to do a movie of the scale. Few places are. Being able to get some of the equipment that didn't exist, being able to create snow, which we had to bring in, being able to get a real sound stage. But then that's part of it. It's part of just rolling up your sleeves and saying, how do we solve tomorrow's problem?
Where we recreated Lantern Way was an equestrian centre.
We walked into it and I said, well, you can't use this, the ceiling's too low. And then somebody came back with a great idea of actually digging the floor out.
We were able to dig down 6 or 7 metres below the surface and created our landscape by digging it out.
We ended up with probably one of the biggest stages in the world to film in, and we needed it to avoid Narnia getting claustrophobic.
I would say my journey on Narnia has been like a marathon running uphill. Okay, we're getting ready to go, so stand by. Here we go. Having gone through some epic battles in my day, I knew this was going to be one, but I don't think I was even prepared or actually really realized how emotionally and physically challenging this film was going to be.
When we went to the South Island to shoot the big battle sequence and Aslan's camp, it was like entering Narnia, truly. It was like walking into a storybook.
Hey, Mark. And that's a chariot.
There's something very spiritually settled about that land. There are very few people who live there, and there's a huge sky, and there are some extraordinary mountains, and this sense of peace, which is really quite phenomenal.
All of a sudden, we had all these helicopters, and we had to get not just the cast and the crew up there, but all the equipment It's very funny, you see a helicopter land and out of it would come you know, all these creatures, some of them with their heads on, some of them with their heads off, you know. So they put them on as they got out of the helicopter, and it really was a circus.
We had snow, sun, hail, rain before lunch, and then we had whole firestorms after lunch. It was beautiful. And the people from Los Angeles found it very difficult to handle the weather, and all the rest of us thought it was great.
We have 600 people we have to worry about. Where do they run and hide if it starts pouring rain? And where can we shoot if it does start pouring rain? What else can we shoot so we don't find ourselves with nothing to do?
And then you'd get out there, and on the moment you could have had something that you thought you were going to shoot and you thought the scene was, and then Don and Andrew would see something and be inspired by that, and all of a sudden you were shooting something you had no idea you were going to be ready for.
What if we laid the sword up on the rock there?
They are very spontaneous and creative individuals, and it's amazingly exhilarating to work with them.
Plus, on top of that, we had 4 very young children who were starring in our film, who'd never starred in a film before, were away from their families. They each had a parent there, but away from their siblings and their schools and their best friends for 6 months.
Do you want us to take that first step onto a stair? That's what we mean, yeah.
Just keeping them from going a little crazy was a full-time job.
I knew this was going to be a difficult shoot, and I know this sounds kind of cheesy, I wanted it to be a nice set. I wanted it to be a place that the kids could come to and enjoy, and there wasn't going to be a lot of yelling and a lot of tension, that we were going to have fun making the film.
In directing the children, Andrew was there for them, which is very important when you have 500 people around you, all that energy coming down to your performance.
Looking around, and then you see the lamppost.
As a director, Andrew has a very special quality, which is a compassion and a understanding and a patience and a genuine warmth. And it really worked for this film with the children.
And I think what I really took away from this was the sense of a new family that it created with the kids and with the crew. The story, the movie, is about family. It's about this fragmented family coming together and in their unity defeating the White Witch and solving the problems of Narnia. And I really feel that as a crew, we came together as a family to overcome all the odds that we had in making such an epic film, and ultimately bringing something to the screen where I think the love that was felt on the set actually comes through on the screen.